in the middle of your day. Thanks for coming to DVG in Virginia. I want to introduce Mr. Ted Hand, who's the president of the Society of Broadcast Engineers. He came up from Charlotte just for our event, and we're going to have him talk a little bit about what SPE National is doing. So Ted and I just got back from a trip from Uzbekistan, where there's a new Eastern European chapter. So
Different group.
there you go.
Thank you. Appreciate being here today. Chapter 37 is one of our strong chapters. Y'all are very proactive. I wish more of our chapters throughout the country were as proactive and active as y'all are here. As Fred said, we just got back from chapter 140 in Eastern Europe. Republic of Georgia had us over. That was a broadcast, Eastern European conference. Very interested, but those people are very eager to learn on education and certifications. They're a strong group. As far as what's going on in national, we are currently searching for a new executive director. As y'all may know, Jim Ragsdale is no longer with us. But it's actually, I'm leaving here today to drive to Indianapolis to do final interviews with some people. And we hope to have a new ED hired by December 1st. I guess that's a thing we're going to meet and make a decision for that. We also, just to remind y'all, the Diamond 60, if any of y'all or know of anybody that's their certification has run out, you can redo your certification without penalty, but you need to do it by December 31st. You need to contact Megan Clapp in Indianapolis if you need information on that. Are there any questions anybody has about what we're doing at National or what SPE is doing now? I'll try to answer it. If I can, I'll get you a contact who can. Okay. I'd like to introduce Maciej Orkman from SMPTE.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Really appreciate it. As Ted mentioned, I am Maciej Orkman, SMPTE DC section chair, and also an SBE member, especially SB 37 member, which I guess gives me the right to provide some local events updates. So it is almost identical to the Hair Club for Men commercial. I am not only a chair, but a member too. So here are my updates. In 2 weeks, for everybody here in person, and also if you're online, I would like to remind and let you know in 2 weeks, we have our annual holiday party, which is a combination of SMPTE, DC, and SB 37 event. Past years, we had about 100 people coming from the DMV production, community, and engineering. So we have CTOs, VPs, and everybody in between from the broadcast industry, from SMPTE and SBE. And I would encourage you to see our table downstairs, scan QR code that will give you more information. If not, if you're online, go to our website and look up details. 2 weeks from now, great event, Busboys and Poets restaurant in Shirlington, Virginia, 6:30 to 9:30, good food, open bar, a lot of great people. We're looking for few good people still to sign up and for a few good sponsors, but keep it in mind, December 5th, 6:30 to 9:30, Shirlington, Busboys and Poets. All right, so that's the first most upcoming event. You should really look into this. January 14th, Tuesday evening, Jeff Welton of Nowtel is making his East Coast tour, and he will present IT security media facilities at 7 p.m. in DC. Meeting starts at 6 p.m. at Sirius XM. More information on the sb37.org events website. So please go and look up that information. February, Some of you might know that the SMPTE DC section has its student chapter at Montgomery College, Montgomery County, Maryland. And every year we have been organizing Media Forward event. This is an event that helps young people get acclimated into what's coming up when they join the workforce in our industry. So we go and we mentor those students. So please look for more information coming up on SMPTE DC website and also SB 37. But please mark it February, probably will be latter part of February. This is a great event to really help young people join our industry here locally in DMV area. March 11, 2025 is another annual report repeat of SMPTE and SB meeting at the Goddard Amateur Radio Club at the Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. The Tech Talk will include several vignettes covering television in the NASA space program, from Apollo to the multi-decade NASA TV broadcast in the NASA space program. So this will be basically since this program was retired this year, and there will be more details coming up on sb37.org website. So look for March 11, 2025.
One of our speakers is here too.
Really?
Yeah.
Great.
You're one of our speakers for NASA.
Who is it, James? James? James O'Neill. Okay, great. James, don't forget that. You're supposed to show up there on that day. Thank you. April will be virtual Zoom annual repeat of Broadcasters and the Law. Typically just before the Las Vegas convention, SB members and those interested in legislation, regulatory issues, and legal trends can tune into the external version of the yearly report to SB board. Details to sign up will be on the local chapter website, sb37.org. And finally, something that we've been talking about for quite some time. A lot of you will be, yes.
That's what you have, and then I have a report for
Okay.
them.
May 21st and 22nd, we are bringing the full Bids by the Bay conference that we used to organize a few years ago. The driving force behind that event was Peter Wharton, who passed away a year ago. We could not bring it earlier because of the logistical problems with the facility. We could not find a better place than Chesapeake Beach. So we're bringing that back. Will be another 2.5 days, May 21st, 22nd. We are working on the program currently. There will be different aspects. What Mike will be presenting will be also part of it, expanded. There will be 2110, fractional frame rate, and many other topics. So there will be more information coming. We hope to have a program set up by January, February. To give enough people to really join us and sponsor this event. We're very excited about it, and we hope that folks will join us in May to be part of it. Eric, did you want to say a few words?
Just a couple of things from certification. This past weekend, we gave a couple of certification exams for SPE. The next SPE exam window is in February, and the deadline to apply is January 3rd. So if you want to get in on the next batch of exams, please go to SPE.org, the national organization, and apply to take your certification exam. We had 2 people take the one this past weekend. And I think in EAS world, we had a EAS committee meeting recently, but we really didn't make any changes to plans and stuff. I think the new EAS test schedule is out for 2025, but it follows the calendars that we've always had, where they're on Wednesdays and alternate
day and night. And I believe we have a board meeting coming sometime in the first part of December, so watch the website. We have much of the schedule for next year is worked on, but we want to organize nominations for elections because we did not get them done last year. And I think we're also going to stagger the terms because right now all of the board members, their terms expire every year. And I think we're going to try to have 2-year terms that are staggered so that not the entire board would expire at the same time.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric. And now I would like to invite Mike Palmer, who will deliver his presentation, C2PA. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy presentation. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Melissa. There we go. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. My name is Mike Palmer. I'm a SMPTE section manager. Very happy to do that. My day job is I'm AVP for Media Management at Sinclair. Within Sinclair, I represent broadcast engineering on our internal AI council, and I also represent Sinclair on the IDR, that's the Entertainment ID Registry Board of Directors. And there is an interesting convergence of all these things with C2PA. So we're going to talk about C2PA today. C2PA is the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity. But first, the disclaimer here that it is a deep topic and I'm only skimming the surface on this, and I do not represent C2PA, although Sinclair is a member of the C2PA group. So we'll talk a little bit about C2PA overview, the C2PA terms, the players that are in C2PA, the bump in the road that we had this year, and the breaking news is our way forward. So what is C2PA? It's, as I said, it's the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, and this is an outgrowth of both the CAI, the Content Authenticity Initiative, which was led by Adobe, and also the Project Origin, which was a project with Microsoft, the BBC, and the New York Times. So these two things came together to create the technical spec that supports both of their goals, which is to protect provenance. If you grab the QR code, which we can put up later for you, that will take you to the C2PA page. So I've given this presentation before, and we always come back to the end with lots of questions about some of the terms that are using and what they mean in the context of C2PA and authenticity. So first of all, Project Origin was Microsoft, BBC, and New York Times project. Came together with the CAI, which was led by Adobe. And now, recently, both the IPTC and SMPTE have become involved in this as well. And I'll talk a little bit more later about what the IPTC is doing. So authenticity, this tells us when content has been created or endorsed by a specific source who can be verified, okay? So I can stand up here and I can say, I created this presentation, my name is Mike Palmer, and if you want to see my driver's license, I'll pull it out and you can confirm that it's me, okay? So that is authenticity. Integrity means that the content has not been modified, okay? So this is my presentation and I'm going to look at it and tell you that it hasn't changed. I can put a hash on it and I can tell you what the hash is, and that would basically be the same thing. And then integrity is actually a cryptographic proof that things haven't been changed, and that would be what the hash is. Provenance is a description of where the content came from and what has been done to it. In the context of a production chain, you're saying this was shot by this particular camera in the field at this time, at this geographic location. It was then brought into an Avid edit bay, which did these effects on it, and then it went through a telestream encoder to create broadcast or streamable content. And each step along the way is described, and it's also hashed so people can't change the description of what happened to it. Transparency is the end user's ability to view all of this information and look at the provenance, look at the identity, and look at the authenticity, and basically make a decision for themselves, which leads us to trust. Trust is a degree of confidence that users have in these three things: authenticity, integrity, and provenance. C2PA will not tell you if a piece of content has been faked. Okay, that's a common misconception. Okay, it will describe everything you need to know to make the determination for yourself if this is a piece of real content or if it has been faked. And it's a spectrum. So obviously, if the signs are very strong, that's almost as good as saying for sure this has not been faked. Okay, but C2PA as a protocol does not make that determination for people. You have to use the information in C2PA to determine for yourself if this is real or fake content. Certificate authorities, these are basically the same internet domain certificate authorities that we talk about today. We're using them for a slightly different purpose. Instead of signing certificates for a website to enable the lock icon in a web browser, we're signing content that enables a special C2PA checkbox to appear. The checkbox in video players and media players is equivalent to the lock icon in a browser. And that's really the largest, highest goal of C2PA, is to enable that in all media players. Almost to the end here, a trust list is an extra step in addition to going through a certificate authority. A trust list says that you have been accepted as part of a group, okay? And there's something called the editorial trust list. There's two trust lists that C2PA has. One is the editorial trust list, and that is now governed by the IPTC. So you come forward as a journalistic organization, and we would say, we're Sinclair, we produce news, we convince the IPTC that we belong to a journalistically trusted group, and now the IPTC says, you are now a journalist, and then that goes to the certificate authority, which then signs it, and then we get our certificate to sign content. That's a very important part of what we're doing. The other trust list is the technical trust list, and that is the list that all of the services and equipment belong to: the Sony camera, the Telestream encoder, the Adobe editor. All of those belong to the trust list and get their certificates from that source of truth. And then the C2PA signing its certificate is ultimately what comes down to both the camera and also to Sinclair to sign the content together to say this was acquired via Sony camera, and this was Sinclair that owned the camera and was operating it at the time. So, the terms that we're talking about. Again, C2PA aims to do for media players what the lock icon did for web browsers. That's its highest order purpose and goal there. This CR is the logo that is being used in players at this point. If the trust chain exists all the way back to the CA and is uncorrupted, then you get the CR in the player, indicating that there is provenance that has not been tampered with, and the user or automated processes can look at that and then determine for themselves what the trust is going to be. So the business value for C2PA, it's editorial verification. So we can say Sinclair produced this, and yes, because it has a hash on it, you can trust that Sinclair produced it. It's brand protection, so that somebody goes out and creates a fake, whether that's a deep fake or a cheap fake. You know the difference between the two? Deep fake is whenever you're using AI to impersonate somebody, use their voice, use their image, and animate them, and basically it's hard to tell from reality. A cheap fake is whenever you send actors in the field to go and stage an event, okay? Or you use a piece of old content from another event and claim that it is part of another event, okay? Both of those are cheap fakes because they don't cost a lot of money to produce, and they look just as good or better than AI fakes. We're also using C2PA to declare and block AI use. So whenever you do produce AI-enabled content or AI-created content, you can sign it with C2PA and you raise your hand up and you say, this was created by AI, okay? It's not necessarily fake content, but we used AI to generate this, and you declare that. We are also able to use that same certificate to tell other AI systems, do not use this for training, okay? So this is very bad if you start using AI-generated content to train the next version of the AI. That's a bad thing to do, and this helps block that. We can also use this for content sales, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Syndicated library deduplication. This goes back to using C2PA in the context of the studios in California and basically putting all of the provenance for a piece of syndicated content or cinematic content inside that same wrapper. And I'll get into why that's important in a moment. And then there's a big important thing that I'll talk about at the end. Hash is made of the media. This is how it works. There are assertions, there's claims, there are ingredients, and there are manifests. I direct you to the C2PA site to get a list of all these things. They have very specific meanings here, and they tell us what has been, where the content has been shot, its technical properties, its editorial properties, and all of that gets signed. And every step of the production process needs to include a C2PA element in it, from your cameras to your ingest to the editing to distribution to writing to the archive to bringing it back and using it in derivative content, so that derivative content says, okay, here is a signature for the whole piece, but there are sub-signatures for each element in that derivative content that's been pulled in from another source. So we can say, this was produced by Sinclair, this came from a Sinclair camera, this came from a network newsfeed, and there's another description from the network about the camera and everything that was shot with, and this came from another Sinclair affiliate over here with that information about the time and location about where it was shot. All of that gets wrapped up in a larger signature at that point. So we're able to literally go down to the individual elements within a derivative piece to determine who produced it, where it was produced, what effects were applied to it, etc. Just skip past some of this very quickly. We talked about derivative content. We talked about the trust list a little bit, but let me come back to that. By default, anybody who's supporting C2PA has to support the technical trust list. So this means that your Sony or Panasonic camera has a certificate, and you're able to trace that all the way back to the certificate authority on that. Editorial trust list, this is where we had the hiccup at the beginning of the year. Google joined the C2PA group at the end of last year and ended up being the big gorilla on the C2PA steering committee. And Google had a concern about identifying people and identity. We expect that this is going to be applied to such a broad range of equipment and services that on this end over here is Hollywood and cameras there, production processes. Then you've got news, okay? Then you've got consumer-generated UGC content, and then just content over here that somebody is shooting with their cell phone that's not really intended for distribution. We expect that within a couple of years, maybe sooner, C2PA could be integrated into everybody's mobile phone, okay? Which means that you then have a route to include identity information, the name of the owner of the phone, into essentially what has been the IPTC header at the top of photos and video, okay? So I think everybody is aware of the concern of publishing a photo on social media that's been taken with your phone because it can include the geographic location and the time and date and stuff. This means that your name could also be included in that, okay? So I think this is relatively easily taken care of with the mobile phone manufacturers and applications there and prompting users, do you want to associate your name with your photos? Or when you export things, do you want to strip this information out? Google is really concerned about that. So concerned that they took out the identity information, the non-technical identity information as a required element of C2PA at the beginning of the year. Now, the BBC, the New York Times, and even Sinclair got really upset about that because it took out the business value for us. There's no brand protection. We know, Sinclair knows from our experience with Next Gen TV and ATSC3, and specifically working with equipment manufacturers to support that standard, that if there's anything in the standard that is optional, it's likely to not be included, okay, as a cost savings measure to get the cost of consumer electronics down. Google made personal and enterprise identity an option, okay? So in the last 6 or 9 months, lots of conversations. Amazon came into the C2PA steering committee, and thankfully they're representing the same view that a lot of broadcasters have, and that is to make this commercially viable, we have to have personal and enterprise identity included as something that's required and not optional. That is where the IPTC came in. The question they then asked was, okay, if you want to put in the identity and claim your journalist or journalistic organization, who is best suited to determine who is a journalist and who is it not? It's not a technical committee, okay? So that's why they turned to the IPTC, which is a collection of journalistic organizations that also includes the EBU. So the IPTC is now basically vetting organizations to come in and be blessed as a C2PA organization, and then you get a certificate. And then from there, the organizations can or will be eventually able to generate certificates for their own cameras and their own staff, okay? Much like the certificate authorities that we use for websites, the hierarchical nature of that, there's a very similar structure that's being created within C2PA with the additional requirement that in addition to proving that you control the domain, you also have to prove that you're a member of an editorial organization. Editorial verification. This is in addition to time, location, equipment, and the human, that it includes the human or organization there that does this. This is, all my graphics here were generated by AI, but I think one of the first AI fakes was the Pope wearing that jacket and talking to the C2PA steering committee. They're actually trying to get the Pope to put the jacket on to do a side-by-side on that. Who knows whether they'll be successful or not. One of the things that C2PA does is brand protection, so that you're able to protect your brand against people claiming that the piece of video or photo or something is created by them. We talked about declare and block AI use. Content reuse and licensing is a very important one to me, because one of the biggest problems I have with a couple of petabytes of content at Sinclair is that I don't have the technical means to identify who shot the content. And if I can't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt who shot the content, I'm not sure it's one of our cameras. It could have been a piece of network news content that made it into the archive. Or it's a derivative clip that has our camera and our reporter, but it includes a couple of protected clips from the network, okay? C2PA will, going forward, not backwards, but going forward, will solve this problem for us, because we will be able to determine what came from our cameras and what came from other people's cameras or other network news sources. And by doing that, I can then indemnify people that are buying the content from us, and I can also, that raises the value of the content that's available out of our archive. And through automated distribution and production facilities, because some of those have rights restrictions on, you bring content over here, they say you can use it for broadcast, but you can't use it online. These will be the flags that can determine where that content can be reused and how it can be reused. We talked about content sales. And this is my favorite one. I'm out to kill Bart Simpson, okay? And the reason why is there's been over 760 episodes of The Simpsons that have been produced. At Sinclair, I have 25 Fox stations, and all of them are trying to keep their own copies of The Simpsons, okay? That's over 65 terabytes of content that I don't need to really be carrying. But which clone do I kill and which one do I keep, okay? If the West Coast, as it's producing syndicated content, was putting C2PA on their content, we would know that this was the studio master that went to a mezzanine level, that then went to a distribution format, and then it came into the station and was transcoded again. We can determine how many generations from source anything is by looking at the provenance, okay? So that makes my job easier of selecting which clones live and which ones die, because we'll kill the ones that are furthest away from the source, that have more generations in them. And this is why the ITER group is really interested in this, okay? Is not only brand protection to make sure somebody doesn't change a piece of syndicated content surreptitiously, but also in just the media management aspects. And then this is the one that I am most excited about. In order for C2PA to work, it has to work from camera through all the production processes, through distribution to the media players itself, okay? And for C2PA to work, you have to carry the signed manifest of metadata through that whole chain, okay? This is something we've never been able to do before in production or broadcast, is carry metadata from source through distribution, the archive, and back again. We've had cameras for years that will, associate geolocation information, time, and other metadata, but as soon as it went to be ingested, that stuff fell off as a matter of course. There were some things you could do with special workflows and certain vendors to try and get that into production a little bit further, but as soon as you went into distribution, again, it was gone. And that information was not carried in the archive, and it wasn't being carried back. Certainly, this wasn't routinely available. If we support C2PA, not only do you get the benefits of content and brand protection, editorial production, but we get all the benefits of having a metadata pipe that is essentially transparent to anything that we want to put into it, okay? I want to be able to do geolocation searches for all of our news content that's searched in the field, or that's shot in the field. This will give me the ability to do that because I will be able to carry it through all the production processes, put it in into the archive, put it into the media management system, the production management system, and be able to search that in a very consistent way. But I think that for the people in this room, that is the most valuable component of C2PA and the most valuable thing that it can produce. At the editorial and the business level, they're very excited about brand protection, AI protection against AI fakes and that sort of thing. This, though, the ability to carry the metadata from glass to glass can change our industry. So here's some things that if you want to snap those with your camera, we can put that up later on, but they will take you to additional resources. And the last thing here, most of C2PA is based upon file-based workflows. There are contingencies in the protocol to go from playout of a file-based C2PA registered piece of content to a stream and have that stream watermarked and indirectly link it back to the original C2PA signatures. Okay, so that's an example of either streaming at the desktop or working with ATSC3 to make that happen. So I've run through this pretty fast to give us a little bit of time. Think about questions. I'm going to talk about this slide, and then I'll come to the questions, okay? This is the solution for editorial trust. So this is from the IPTC, and this is available on the IPTC website, but this describes their process for both vetting an organization for editorial trust and confirming that, and then creating certificates through the certificate authority and distributing those. I've waded through this. The most disturbing thing about this was it requires them to contact both my CFO and my CTO, okay? Now, Mike Kralick's on board with this, he gets it, but my CFO is not gonna see this coming. So I'm gonna have to do a lot of legwork to explain why she's getting a letter from the IPTC asking her to verify that Sinclair is an editorial organization and they are permitted by the C-suite to sign up for C2PA. Questions?
I may be the obvious. I realize that the whole thing with C2PA is to do AI so it can't tell it's fake. How hard is it, or is it impossible to actually fake the certificate? Could you manipulate the certificate to make it look like it was real?
It's very difficult, and the security behind this is using the same security protocols that we use to secure certificates for websites.
Okay.
So what I'll say is if this is vulnerable to being hacked, then the entire e-commerce ecosystem of the world suffers from the same vulnerability.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Yes?
I have a couple of questions. The first is, you mentioned the media is hashed. Is that a cryptographic hash?
Yes, it is. There's a suite of hashes that you can choose from. So it is flexible, and there are also a limited set of encryption options that you have for doing other things.
And is the metadata, the provenance metadata, is that hashed at each step of the line?
It is.
What kind of hash is that?
Again, you get to choose from a limited set of hashes that you can use for that. So it is fairly robust. We can talk about the details offline. But again, the key here is not only do you get a hash of the media, but the metadata is also hashed. A little tangent. Remember how big blockchain was in presentations 3 to 4 years ago? Everything was about the blockchain. Those were distributed blockchains where you're writing a change to the cloud and then it would get hashed, and the next thing would hash that new metadata plus the hash of the last link in the chain, and then it would just continue forward. Taking the hash of the last link and including it in the hash of the next link is called a Merkle tree. Okay, basically it's a local blockchain, and that's what we're doing with C2PA. Okay, C2PA is, in my opinion, the best, most practical example of the application of blockchain in broadcast, but it's not distributed. It's not written to the cloud. You're not dependent on the cloud or somebody to maintain that, because each piece of media that has its own C2PA provenance in it also has its own set of blockchain going all the way back.
And then one last question. One of the things you mentioned in part of your presentation is part of your challenge is you get programming from your networks.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that programming is originated on film. If your camera is not an electronic camera that can stamp something with provenance metadata, how do you handle when the original is film or something analog?
So this is important, so I'm going to repeat the question for the people on the streaming audience. So the question is, if you're going back and need to include a piece of content that was not shot with the C2PA-enabled camera, okay, how does that work into the system? And the way that works is, for example, Sinclair as a journalistic organization would then step in and create an assertion. Without a technical assertion, it's an editorial assertion that Sinclair vouches for this content and its description. Sinclair either owns it or vouches for its description of that content. Okay? Now there's a lot of content that's not going to be C2P enabled all the way back to the glass at the beginning of this. And that's why it's important for the journalistic organization to begin signing content in things like Telestream Vantage. Okay? That's creating streaming content, or Amagi, in our case, that's producing broadcast content. And to put the signatures on at that point, basically saying everything that comes through this has been vouched for by Sinclair. Okay? And then other content will come in with more verbose descriptions, still have the CR logo on it, but you'll be able to see more detail in the chain going back to the beginning. Now again, C2PA, as I said at the beginning, does not tell people whether content is real or fake. It simply gives you clues. Okay, here's the provenance description of this. So if a clip airs and it's simply signed by Sinclair saying, trust us, we've looked at this, okay, that has one level of trust. But if Sinclair signs it and says, trust us, and by the way, here is the original certificate from the camera saying it was shot at this geo coordinates at this time, that has more trust. okay? So it's a range of trust cues that that C2PA is putting into the protocol that allows people to make their own decisions. Yes?
I'm sort of trying to understand the technical aspect of where is this all carried? So you're shooting on a camera, you're recording on a memory card, you're shooting in some codec and file format. So there's some metadata that's included in there in a space that already exists or it's being added. And then the next step in the line takes that out and looks at it and modifies it.
So the first step in making this happen is to work with the metadata as sidecars. Okay, so the early implementations of this all deal with sidecars because the question of how does this get put into the media wrapper so that the media inside it is hashed but the wrapper itself is not, okay? Those are questions that were open. In still photos, they're putting that in the IPTC headers, and that's pretty much been worked out for still photos right now. For video, there's a lot of work going on within SMPTE to determine how MXF is used to carry this metadata in an MXF header. In the meantime, we're using sidecars to go ahead and prove our workflows out and make this useful, but it doesn't become truly useful, to your point, until it's actually carried within the media wrappers themselves.
And then presumably all the equipment down the chain that would deal with these files and need to add their own thing has to then be able to decode that information, modify it, put it back.
Every service and piece of equipment in the chain needs to be able to support C2PA and at least, at the very minimum, passing that metadata through, okay? We would prefer each service and piece of equipment have their own certificate so they can add to the provenance as it goes along. But we really need people to kind of get on board with this. The more transparent that pipe is, the more valuable it is for content protection and also just generically for carrying the metadata through the process.
And I was just thinking this through. So in the case of a studio origination shoot where you're not recording on a file in the camera, but you're going to a switcher, et cetera, some piece of equipment there, maybe when the recording is made, would add that information. I'm imagining somebody
Correct.
making C2PA inserter boxes that you would put your SDI in, and then you type in your information and it would add that.
There is a whole sub-work stream within C2PA for handling the live stream components. For HLS, there's a strategy for getting a C2PA hash on every file bit that ends up in the HLG bucket, okay? Then there are also methods to put watermarks on. And the method that's being used in ATSC3 works quite well for that, and it's been specified for that, and Verance has a working model of it. Yes?
How do you expect, if I make a fairly complex edit, so I'm going to have multiple camera shoots, I have some graphics, I'm putting this all together into an editor. What is your in an ideal world, what would you want the editor to generate here in terms of C2PA data on the output file?
C2PA has to carry all this information through and then add the context of the present edit as well as the historic content of the sources, and then wrap that all up and sign it. And whenever I first heard about that, I went, there's an obvious problem here, and that's the size of that payload because it's only going to grow, okay? Within the C2PA spec, it includes compression, okay? And we know that textual descriptions compress very well, okay? So it's applying existing standards to compress those payloads before they go through. The more important question, in my view, is how will the NLEs and the other tools display that information, okay? And our suggestion so far would be to provide alternate tracks that look like an audio track that have markers on it that represent the metadata, and if you want to see it, you could click into that track and then you get the metadata description. Feel free to make your own suggestions to equipment manufacturers on that, but that's the guidance that Sinclair is trying to provide at this point.
And if there's pieces that don't have any C2PA information, that's fine. Then you just have these pieces, and as you said, it's then up to the person that looks at it if you trust it or not.
Right, and gaps are allowed, okay, and they can either just be pregnant omissions, okay, like what is this? We don't have an explanation for it. Or It can be an omission that says we didn't have the information, but we're going to vouch for it, or it can be retracted information, because the spec does allow you to go in, for instance, and take out geo coordinates and camera information if something was of a sensitive nature, and then you're relying on the journalistic organization's just general reputation to say trust us on this. Good questions. And I think we're at time. One thing I will say, one more plug for Bits by the Bay coming up next year. We're going to the 2.5 day format on that. Lots of good topics. We're going to be diving into this deeper and practical applications of this and some other technology. Really encourage you to look at the agenda that we're developing for that and consider attending. Thank you.